So I'm going to present the relief maps as a method for research on intersecting inequalities from a spatial and an emotional perspective. First, I will focus on the conceptual framework, specifically on situated intersectionality and on the emotional perspectives to inequalities, and then I will focus on two dimensions of intersectionality, positions and effects, presenting these the relief maps as a way to visualize it. So first, in relation to situated intersectionality, as you might already know, building on the debates that were taking place within the Black feminist movements in the US, the concept of intersectionality was introduced as such by Kimberly Crenshaw as a way of describing the interconnections existing between race and gender in Black women. It has expanded to theorize a wide range of intersecting axes of inequality, such as sexual orientation, class, or age, and a variety of disciplines. Main arguments could be summarized in many different ways, but some of the most relevant issues, also in relation to the methodology, is that experiences of oppression cannot be understood from a single axis framework. Also that there are relations of mutual constitution between different axes, which means that we cannot add, for example, Black to women, but that their interrelation creates a specific configuration of inequalities. Also that we are all positioned in all power structures, and that we are all simultaneously experiencing privileges and oppressions due to our positions. And also that the effects of our positions vary in relation to time and to space. And here is also what I want to introduce is spatial perspective, which is one of the central elements of the relief maps. And the way I relate this spatial perspective is in relation to two different axes, which is the specialities and also the effects in relation to the knowledge production. So first of all, in relation to the spatial role, in relation to the role that the space has in its intersectional relations, in the case of the knowledge production, I think it's important to place intersectionality at the core of Black feminism when we are using this concept, and also highlighting the specific voices and bodies from which it arises. And I think it is central to avoid whitewashing and also ignoring Black women as the producers of knowledge and also as active players in the fight against discrimination, specifically in a time when intersectionality is being used and also co-opted by institutions and the academy. In relation to the politics of knowledge production, of the concept, placing intersectionality, it's also important to do it from a global perspective. So that the theory of intersectionality arising in the United States should be also situated against a global backdrop of economic, political, and cultural imperialism, and within the context of English-speaking hegemony in knowledge production. In other contexts, at a similar period as in the US, other proposals that interrelated different axes of oppression also appeared from marginalized collectives. As an example, already in the 19th century, there were women denouncing the violence they were suffering because of their positions of oppression in multiple layers, such as because of being indigenous, being poor or Black, for example, and specifically in Latin America. And there were also other intersectional developments in India, Kurdistan, Catalonia, or the Basque Country, also since the 70s. In this sense, I think that it's important to differentiate between intersectionality as a theory related to Black feminism in the US, and then what I call intersectionality like thought and action as a phenomenon of a genuine development of political practices and theorizations on the relations between different axes of inequality. I think that it has important political implications in relation to research, and I think that it's important that we are clear on what are like our epistemologies when we are developing specific tools for research. So now in relation to the second issue, which is the emotional perspectives to inequalities, which is also a central part of the relief maps as a specific tool. So political and social research on inequalities is generally focused on the public sphere of life, ignoring emotions as a relevant field for studying inequalities. However, emotions are deeply related to the experience of discriminations and to power dynamics in general, and they can reveal unexpressed or normalized inequalities too. As an example, just think about inequality indicators like life expectancy or salary, for example. Most of them try to show inequality through numbers that seem objective. However, many discriminations related to homophobia, sexism, or racism, for example, have to do with emotions such as humiliation, fear, or exclusion. And here the question is, how can we approach such discriminations in a way that shows these existing inequalities? So how can we focus on emotions also as pointers to inequalities? And here I use Saramet's conceptualization of comfort and discomfort as holistic emotions to develop the relation between intersectionality and this emotional dimension that is also situated. So that is also has this geographical dimension. As she argues in relation to whiteness specifically, to be comfortable is to be so at ease with one's environment that it is hard to distinguish where one's body ends and the world begins. One fits, and by fitting, the surfaces of bodies disappear from view. Based on this specific framework, taking this specific way of understanding intersectionality, so the situated intersectionality, this understanding of emotions as a central dimension of the configuration of inequalities, and specifically taking this concept of comforts and discomforts, I am developing this new project on how to map intersecting inequalities from an emotional and geographic perspective. So here we relate intersectionality, emotions, and the geographic dimension. It is a project funded by the European Research Council. And INTERMAPS, as you can see here, is conducted by an interdisciplinary team. I have a great team, I must say, with people that has like really different expertise in different fields of research. And one of the aims of this project is precisely to create a new tool, which is based on the relief maps as an old model that we already had since some years ago. And also creating some tools for analysis and this visualization of inequalities. I'm not going to focus here on the theoretical developments, but so my aim here is to focus precisely on the method, on this new tool on the relief maps. But I just wanted to give a little bit of context. So we are already applying this tool to a sample of 1,000 people in Catalonia. So the application is only in a specific case study, which is Catalonia, which is a region within Spain. We chose this specific case because there's like enough diversity here to just test our tool. And we also wanted to have like a big sample, and it was easier also for us in relation to also ethical issues to do it in a place where we already have contacts and we can build these bonds of trust with our participants. So the idea here is to go beyond the study of concrete axes of inequality, and also to go beyond specific groups like Black women, which is something that I also have been doing when applying an intersectional perspective. This is what Leslie McCall calls an intracategorical approach, which means studying a specific group of people that is intersected in a specific way, so that their positions are specific. So what we want to do here is to go beyond these specific groups and to consider all dimensions. So it means both privilege and oppression of different axes. We have, I think it's like 9 axes of inequalities across different places of the everyday life, following this intercategorical approach, which means that we are not focusing on a specific group, but we are focusing on the whole population, which is over 8 years old. So from children to the elderly people, like all the population in Catalonia can be part of our sample. So now I will focus on these intersectional dynamics regarding 2 dimensions of intersectionality. First of all, in relation to positions, which is something also relevant for our project, just this collecting data on the profile of our samples from an intersectional perspective. And then the effects, which will focus on how we experience these power structures, so on the effects of power structures on our everyday life, and the effects relate to sexism, racism, or transphobia, for example. So first of all, the tool in relation to this first part on collecting and visualizing intersectionality in relation to the dimensions, to the positions dimension. Here I will present the metaphor of the basket of apples. I don't know if you know, like all these debates that have been taking place in relation to the metaphors of intersectionality. The most famous metaphor is obviously Crenshaw's crossroads and traffic. There has been an important criticism to this metaphor, probably due to a misreading of Crenshaw's metaphor, because she is absolutely clear when she's writing about intersectionality, but her metaphor has led to some confusion. These discussions relate to how to the fact that this metaphor seems to convey an additive model of intersectionality, and it relies on considering that oppressions or power structures are separate and independent of each other in a way that it is only in the crossroad or in the roundabout where these different oppressions meet and relate in an additive way. Some other authors have tried to overcome the problem of addition and to the separation between oppressions by proposing other metaphors that try to capture this complex modification of categories in this mutual constitution character of intersectional relations. Here you can see as an example Jordan Zachary's marble cake. She talks about this marble cake in which it is impossible to separate its components. Also, Maria Lugones uses the metaphor of the egg with the aim of resisting the logic of purity and presenting the image of the egg, pointing out that we are unable to separate completely its two different parts, so the egg white and the egg yolk. Then with Marta Jorba, we developed the idea that there's a general concern regarding most of these metaphors, which is the problem of reification. It is that categories are represented as objects rather than as properties of objects. The proposed metaphor tries to present social categories as less reified by making these boundaries. So these metaphors that I have shown you propose these images where the boundaries of things are more porous or relate things in more complex ways. But from our perspective, these metaphors lead us to thinking that the road, the gel, for example, or the egg yolk exist as separate units prior to the mix, the crush, or the contact with other units. In our view, this creates an imaginary that moves away from visualizing the mutual constitutive character of intersectionality and precisely reinforces what intersectionality wanted to overcome, which is conceiving race and gender as discrete strands. This led us to the creation of the metaphor of the apple, where the different properties of the apple, so its color, its size, or its taste, for example, would be the different categories. For example, color would be gender and size could be race. So they are always, so all these properties are always present within the apple, and they all configure the apple as a whole. So then going specifically to the tool, taking inspiration from Kanner's New York City project led by Francesca Berardi, and also from Giorgia Lupi, the humanist that works on data visualization. With INTERMAPS, with this project, we have developed a digital tool to visualize this profile data. So first of all, with the website, when we collect profile data, which is something that we normally do in many of our projects, collecting data of our participants. When we collect data on, for example, positions of gender, sexual orientation, or religion, an avatar is being created based on this apple metaphor. For example, the left part of the apple refers to gender, the right part to race, the seeds refer to age, and the peel to sexual orientation. So each participant has an apple based on their specific positions in different power structures. And also we collect data on some other characteristics, such as their participation in social movements. As you can imagine, we had many discussions on how to visualize positions in a non-hierarchical way, and also in a way that shows both oppression and privilege, and the mutual constitution character of intersecting positions. In this sense, for example, privilege is always represented in a similar color, something like here, which is, or if it's not in relation to colors, privilege is also represented in normative way, so it can be like easily identified, like in this example. Also reminding Barcelona's typical colors, the corners show the participation in social movements, thus creating something like a mosaic that relates people through their actions and not through their identities. So the corners are what is in contact with other apples, so with other participants, and it's through the participation in social movements that we are also related one to each other, which also tries to overcome this identity politics in a sense, so visualizing it in another way. Here you can see the legend that we created for this profile data with all the categories and with all the options. This was created specifically for this project and for the Catalan context. So as you can see here, in relation to the place of origin or birth, you have Catalonia, the rest of Spain, other countries. So here we have the list of all the other countries, but it's like specifically thought for our context. But in the website, which is free and open, I will show it to you in a few minutes, it can be easily modified to be adapted to any other places. There are some important things here and some like important decisions. For example, that there's always this I prefer not to answer option, that there's always this others option, which means in the website that you can write it down. So if you want to be identified in another way, you can write it down like specifically. If you do not feel like identified with being a woman, man, trans, or non-binary, you can just write another category. And also that many of them have the option of just selecting multiple answers. So I could choose, for example, being lesbian and asexual as an example. So you can always, not always, but almost always, like select more than one category. Okay, so this was in relation to how this tool collects data on the profile. As you have seen, it is grounded on a specific conceptualization of intersecting positions, and also on many like specific theories and epistemologies on how to collect data and on how to categorize people, on how we are collecting this data. And as I will also show to you, it has some effects and some consequences on the same process of research. So when we are collecting data through this avatar, when we are collecting the profile data, there's something that happens when you create your avatar and when you see like the final avatar that you are, because it also helps you to reflect on your own positions and to understand like your position in a broader sense. So now in relation to the effects I mentioned, I will present the relief maps model specifically. The relief maps are a proposal that I created some years ago for collecting, analyzing, and visualizing geographic data on inequalities, emotions, and intersectionality. It is an example of it, and as you can see, it shows these three different dimensions. The social one, intersecting power structures, which would be like the lines in different colors. The geographic, which are the places in the x-axis, and the psychologic, which are the emotions that go from comfort downwards to discomfort upwards. They show the curves of systemic and systematic discomforts due to various positions in diverse spaces of everyday life. So every dot is placed by each individual in a gradation of comfort to discomfort, and it is related to emotions such as fear, humiliation, or exclusion. In that sense, emotions here are considered as pointers to inequalities. The name relief maps highlights two of the meanings that it has in English. Relief as an accentuation, which would be these hills, these curves that rise up and show the places of oppression, And then relief also as alleviation or removal of pain, which would refer to the valleys or to those places where oppressive experiences decline and then culminate with these places of relief. Thus, this concept of relief shows the dynamism and the mobility between places and experiences according to these different structures, to these different power structures that intersect. The relief maps were created as a tool to be used by hand by the participants. This was like the first version of the relief maps. First, they had to reflect on their experiences in every place for their in every place of their everyday life in relation to different social positions. So, how do I feel because of being a woman at home, because of being a woman at my workplace, for example. Then they classified the places in 4 different types, which is the second step. And finally, they drew their own relief map. This has been used in several projects, but when I created the digital tool of the relief maps, the first one, it importantly expanded its potentialities in many different ways. So this is like now the old website is still open, so and it's free to use if you want to. It has 2 main functions. As a researcher, you can create your own model of a relief map. You can choose the categories you want to work with. Then also you can choose the places that you want to use for your research. And then once you have defined this, you can send a link to your participants and they can take part of it. Participants with this website have to fill in a form like this, explaining how they feel in every place by its category, selecting the emotions related to it, and also situating the dot in a gradation of comfort to discomfort. So here you can see an example of the screen for home and sexual orientation. And then a relief map like this is automatically generated and it can be seen and downloaded by the researcher together with the comments related to each dot. The data is also available in a form of a relief map like this one, but also as an Excel table, allowing for a deeper analysis of the data, both from a qualitative and a quantitative perspective. So the relief maps are a proposal for the collection and visualization of data on intersecting inequalities from a geographical and emotional perspective, and they are also a model for analyzing and conceptualizing intersectionality. They are a tool for empirical research on the effects of intersecting inequalities. Place is considered as constitutive in intersectional dynamics and is also a central element that shows the dynamism of power relations. It also goes beyond additive conceptions of intersectionality. There's no reinforcement of categories. Privilege and oppression are always taken into account. And they also allow for a great variety of categories to be considered. Another important issue is that they imply a deep reflection on oppression, privilege, and inequalities, what has an important transformative potential also during the research process. And finally, it's important to note that they are not an end in themselves, but material to be analyzed. So they are a tool for collecting, analyzing, and visualizing data. That's also why they are not a graphic, but a map or a drawing of the subjective perception of inequalities. I wanted to present some examples from a research carried out with 88 teenagers from Barcelona province to show the potentialities in relation to visualizing the effects and the lived experience on intersectional inequalities. So as you can see here, the relief map was a bisexual atheist white woman. You can see the very accentuated corpse she drew for sexual orientation in green, but also for gender in red and origin in yellow. In relation to sexual orientation at home, she said, recently I had the courage to explain my sexual orientation to my parents. They didn't take it well. My mother's partner made very, very homophobic comments. In relation to gender in public space, she says, in my opinion, the street is where I feel less respect as a woman. I have been chased, shouted things from a car, whispered, and some have also touched my body without consent. And in relation to origin, religion, and nationality in public space, she says, I have received some denigrating comments, but As I am white-faced, I have never received too many bad comments. As you can see here, she expresses her feelings of discomfort that are linked to diverse social processes of exclusion and discrimination in the city, such as, for example, this process of heteronormalization of public space. Here, the homophobic attitudes from parents appear as both as central for processes of victimization of youth in private spaces, but also as clear limitations for their access to public space. She's also referring to fear in public space, which is in itself a restriction to women's mobility in cities, and the intersection between age and gender here is especially relevant for the configuration of it. And in relation to origin and ethnicity, her relief map also shows the process of racialization of migrant youth and the diverse configurations of racial discrimination in different contexts. In this line, there's another example. Here you can see how this young Muslim man feels discriminated because of his religious identity in public space. He says, it depends on the spaces. Sometimes I get discriminated, but normally good. And you can see how the yellow line is now quite accentuated in public space, but also in high school and in social networks. This points to racialization processes and their interconnection with religious identity and migration processes, which could be also linked to the processes of securitization of the urban space. He also expressed he had received some Islamophobic comments after terrorist attacks pointing at him as a potential terrorist. And also I think that this example is also related to broader processes that link the everyday experiences of youth in a high school like this one to international geopolitics. And another one in relation to physical appearance, which is an axis that we added for this research. He says that for physical appearance at high school, he said at the institute, I feel bad about my physical appearance because during 4 years, I have suffered bullying because of my skin problems. It shows how physical appearance can be also the cause of important discriminations and violence with intense psychological and physical effects. In this case, these discomforts point at central aspects related to the social conditionings of health. And although my perspective is not psychological here, the approach would have clear potentialities for understanding how social positions and discrimination deeply affect human well-being. There are many interesting examples that I could show you and that show the complexity of their experiences and how inequalities are felt and are lived. But there are also other kinds of relief maps that are what I call the maps of silence. Here you can see the relief map of a heterosexual white Catholic young man. His lines are all flat lines showing his privilege in the different places of his everyday life. In relation to his sexual orientation, for example, he just says good or even nothing, and he links emotions such as acceptance, freedom, protection, or safety. Another one, very similar. They seem like less interesting relief maps than the others, but I think that it's interesting to show how privilege is spatially configured to and how it reproduces inequalities. So these are flat lines first of all of silence, lines of dots empty of words and of feelings. So here, visually, we are also representing how privilege is configured, which is basically as a lack of awareness of where, as Sarah Ahmed said, of where the own body ends and the world begins. And it is also visualized through this emptiness and the silence of emotions. So now with this ongoing project with INTERMAPS, I have some results from a previous project because we don't have like any findings to show. We have lots of data, but not like specific analysis. So with this ongoing project, the aim was to improve this model of the relief maps that I have shown you, adding new elements and basically integrating qualitative, quantitative, and the spatial analysis approaches. So after asking the profile information through the Apple image, This is the new website of the relief maps. First, there's the information sheet and the informed consent that any researcher can upload their own PDF with their with all the information and the specific consent that they want from their participants. So once the participant consents participating in the research and using the website, they get asked to fill in the form in relation to their profile. You have already seen it. So this is the first step, and once the apple is already finished, then they see this screen, which has really changed from the previous website. So now what you have with the Relief Maps website is this screen. So with this new tool, the screens of the form of the previous website, this form, like for every intersection of its like place and identity, it disappears, and participants only have this where they can move the dots upwards and downwards, and they can also write their comments in relation to every dot. So every time you just click in a dot and you move this dot, this small screen appears. Here you can write how you feel, and you can also select different emotions. The aim here was to allow for more places and more categories to be taken into account, and also to make it more interactive, with the idea of using the power of the visual and to enhance the reflection process of participants, and also to collect more nuanced data. So all this like new structure and all this new visual structure has been thought both for like the experience of participants, and also because we wanted like more nuanced data and more specific data on some axes. Here you can see how participants write their comments and how they select their emotions. And also categories are also being added. And so they can digitally draw their own relief map directly. So it's not that they first write their comments and then the website automatically creates their relief map, but they are like interactively drawing their own relief map through this digital tool. And then the new element that has been added with this new version is geo-referentiated data on lived experiences. Here we took the amazing works of feminist GIS scholars such as Neipo Kwan, also references from other researchers that have been working on critical perspectives to GIS, mainly coming from feminist, queer, anti-racist, decolonial, and humanistic perspectives. And based on all of this, there is this last screen where participants identify specific places of their everyday life and add comments and emotions to specific points. Some of the decisions made here from this critical perspective include, for example, the use of circles, so these zones instead of dots. Using zones and not dots avoids some ethical problems in relation to re-identification, but also this decision considers scale from a lived experience approach, so that our experience, it's not normally like with a coordinate, but it's like in many different scales. So here you can either select a square in your city, for example, or even a whole country where to add a comment. And we have seen that it really works well, for example, with people that have migrated and they want to write something in relation to their place of origin, which is not specifically in a city or in a street, but it's like in relation to the country in a more abstract way. So this way of collecting data also allows for this conceptualization of a scale that it's more related to the lived experience of people and of our participants. So with this, we have georeferentiated data that combines textual narratives, points and areas with these geographic coordinates, and also places with unknown or more vague locations to capture these complex qualities of place and scale in relation to the lived experience of intersectional inequalities. Here you can see one of the relief maps that we can see through this new website. So we can play with this with the comments, which ones do we want to show or not. So we can just select different dots and see what are the comments that we have. And then there's also in the website, there's a tool for researchers where they can create like aggregate relief maps with all their sample, or just selecting, for example, I want like an aggregate map just with women, for example, or just with young people. So then you can compare these different aggregate maps. Here you have an example of it. Final remarks. As here, I wanted to show this method, the relief maps for research on different dimensions of intersectionality, both in relation to positions, which is it's not just collecting data on the profile. We think that it is something else when we are asking people about their social positions. There's also a reflection here, and we pay a lot of attention in this first part of the positions, because we think that it creates like a first step in relation to their introspection of their own experience and their position in relation to broader power structures, which it's also important. And then this method of collecting data on the effects of intersectional dynamics. Also, I wanted to show the potentialities of the visual and the digital for collecting, analyzing, and displaying data. Here we're using it for intersectionality or these intersecting inequalities, but it's in general for social sciences. For example, Marcol, who is also working on the team, she's applying these relief maps to the impacts of climate change. So she's instead of using like axis of inequality, she's using like the drought or the rise of temperatures and how they affect the everyday life of people. And we think that it's important that in social sciences, we also use these visual and digital tools that can really help us collecting different kinds of data. Also, this way of critically using mixed methods. So although we have a qualitative, like a general qualitative approach to data and to sampling, I can talk a little bit more of sampling if you want to afterwards. So we have this qualitative approach to the research in general, but we are also using like quantitative methods, and we will be using quantitative methods for our analysis, as well as spatial analysis techniques, but we use them in a critical way. And also the potentialities of creating new softwares for collecting new data. So sometimes there are some limitations that are not like theoretical or conceptual or epistemological or methodological limitations, are like sometimes we just have like limitations that are very technical. So with some geographic information systems, if we can only collect data on specific coordinates, it's difficult that we will be able to collect different scales that have to do with the lived experience, for example. So here, I also wanted to stress the importance of creating new softwares if we want to collect, analyze, and visualize other types of data. And that's all. Thank you very much.